The omnipresence of God. Now, simply defined, this means that God does not have size or spatial dimensions and is present at every point of space with his whole being, yet God acts differently in different places. And if you look at the word here, omni and presence, omni refers to all, and presence or to attendance, existence. God attends every place. He's existent in every place. If you have an omnidirectional microphone, that means it takes in sound from all directions. What this means is that when God created creation, when he created all things, he created even the concept of space. So think about outer space, this empty vacuum of nothing in it. He created even the emptiness, as well as those things that fill it. Often we think of creation as only the physical things we can see. But God created even those empty places too. It's sort of, when we talk about the omnipresence of God, it's sort of like how we have interacted with gravity our entire lives. Wherever we go, it's there. When we don't think about it, it's there. When we do think about it, it's there. And though we think about it occasionally, our thoughts have no bearing on the presence of God in terms of changing it. He is always there. Now, God is present in a way we call it repletively everywhere. So it's not as though God makes copies of himself and leaves them evenly dispersed throughout the universe. And it's not as though God was like a glass of water that has spilled out and there's a limited amount of volume to him. And toward the center is where God is most present, where we see more of it, and then we get out to the edge of this pool of water, there's less of him there. It's not as though God runs out or there's less of him. Even if we could fly through outer space from galaxy to galaxy at the speed of light for thousands of years, and all the while, every new place that we would come to, God is already there, even before we ever arrived. And we leave here, when we leave whatever room we're in, he remains. God is everywhere. So let's look at some passages of scripture that teach this. Deuteronomy 10:14. Behold, to the Lord your God belong heaven and the heaven of heavens, the earth with all that is in it. Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 23 through 24. Am I a God at hand, declares the Lord, and not a God far away? Can a man hide himself in secret places so that I cannot see him, declares the Lord? Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord? Now you look at these two passages in tandem. The first you could see, well, yeah, okay, so God is the God of the heavens and the earth, but we have kings that are kings over their kingdom, but they're not everywhere. And then Jeremiah makes it clear, like, hey, this is the God of the universe, and he's everywhere. Colossians 1:17, we can see that his presence holds us together, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. 1 Kings 8:27, but will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built you? Look at that. God cannot be contained by space, no matter how large. There's not a place that we could bottle up God, or we could exhaust God, or God could run out, or diminish, or grow any less in his presence. He's there. There's many other passages, too, that we could point out. But let's turn to a bit of a blind spot that we often have creep into the church, and it's this popular level myth that one place that God is not present is hell. And there are many passages, of course, that point to the reality, to the doctrine of God's omnipresence. But somehow we sort of have come up with this doctrine, and I couldn't tell you where it comes from exactly, is that the definition of hell is the absence of God, absence of the presence of God. And this would be incorrect. God's presence may be expressed in different ways. He can be present to punish, he can be present to sustain, or he can be present to bless, but he is never not any of those three categories. And if there's another category that would be up here, it would not be that he is not present in some other way. So let's look at two passages in particular that teach that God would be present even beyond the grave, even to death, and by good and necessary inference in hell. Psalm 139, 7 through 10. Where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. Now, this reference to Sheol isn't referring to hell proper, but it is a reference to the grave and to death. And the main point of the passage is that there is no place that somebody could run from the presence of the Lord. There's no place they could get away from them. And if you try to make up some exception to this, what we're doing is turning the text on its head then. Let's look at one more passage. Amos chapter 9, verse 1 through 4. I saw the Lord standing beside the altar, and he said, strike the capitals with a threshold shake, and shatter them on the heads of all the people. And those who are left of them I will kill with the sword. Not one of them shall flee away, not one of them shall escape. If they dig into Sheol, from there shall my hand take them. If they climb up to heaven, from there I will bring them down. If they hide themselves on top of Mount Carmel, from there I will search them out and take them. And if they hide from my sight at the bottom of the sea, there I will command the serpent, and it shall bite them. And if they go into captivity before their enemies, there I will command the sword, and it shall kill them. Now, there's a lot going on in this passage, but for the sake of our lessons, let's just focus in on this last part relating to the omnipresence of God. Notice here, if this person tries to flee, they are not able to escape, to include Sheol, even on to death, even the lowest parts of the earth. Even if they go up to heaven, there's no place that somebody could run from the Lord. So how do we think of the presence of God and hell? Well, let's go back to these three categories that God can be present to punish, sustain, or bless. Well, he's definitely not there blessing them. And in a sense, when people will be thrown into hell in the last judgment along with Satan and his demons, they will be sustained in a way. But this is going to be the continuous punishment by God in the presence of the wrath of God forever. This is not some pocket of the universe that God creates that he no longer goes into. No, God is present in that time. And that's one of the dreadful things that makes hell a horrific place, is to the holy God that we have offended, that we would be in the presence of his holy wrath forever. God is everywhere.